For those of you here, we'll start in a couple of minutes. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Honoring Your Heart. Oh, just a moment. Sorry about that. We had a siren test here. Didn't want to interrupt the introduction. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Honoring Your Heart, Planning for Impact with Campus Prevention. My name is Orlando Cooper, one of the graduate assistants at IHEC, and I'll be your moderator. I am assisting Madison, the Assistant Director for the Illinois Higher Education Center for Alcohol, Other Drug, and Violence Prevention, and we are very excited to be hosting today's event. Before I hand over the microphone, I have a few housekeeping items to cover about today's webinar and the GoToWebinar platform. For those of you new to using GoToWebinar, you will see the control panel on the right of your screen. This is where you will find the question box that you can type and submit to at the end of the presentation. All attendees will be muted for today's program, but that doesn't mean you still can't participate. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Dr. David Anderson.
Thank you, Orlando. I'm glad to be here. I wish we were gathering in person. So I was sharing with Orlando earlier, my first introduction to the Illinois Higher Ed Center was decades ago. And then more recently in person, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, we gathered at the University of Chicago, had an all-day training, and I'm excited to be back. I've done some webinars for you in the meantime. Eventually, we'll all be back together in person. So I thank you for this opportunity to be here. I look forward to our session today. I hope it's helpful for you. And I'm very appreciative to Orlando for his coordination of this, for Madison Palmer, and then to Eric Davidson. Again, my name is David Anderson. I'm Professor Emeritus. What that means is I determine my schedule now. I'm not doing classroom teaching. I'm still doing workshops, training, still doing writing and research. You're going to see some pieces of multiple of those strands. I'm doing a lot of community work. I leave from here and do something with our Chamber of Commerce shortly. I'm in Celebration, Florida, and love the flexibility and love being able to think a little more unencumbered without day-to-day assignments and committee work, although I have plenty of local committee work. So I worked in higher education since 1971. That's where I began. Yes, that was 50 years ago. I've done a lot of work with the campuses, with communities, and I've always believed in, blending the head and the heart. I've been translational in my work with research, trying to make it understandable by others, and talking about applications. And when I advise doctoral and master's students, I would always give them a heads up. If you want to have me as an advisor, one of the questions I'm going to ask is, what are the implications? What are the policy applications and implications at the local, state, and national level for your research, even if it's finite or focused? What are the implications? Because that's always been my focus and it's my priorities. As a faculty member, I was pretty non-traditional in that I had probably 170 over my 28 years of George Mason. I had about 170 different projects in the community, some national, some research, some application. And before my faculty work, I worked in residence halls. I started at The Ohio State University. I worked at Virginia Tech, Radford University in Virginia, and then Ohio University. Today, good morning, and we're talking about honoring your heart. Honoring your heart. I believe in your heart. And part of what I want to do is build on your desire, your passion, whether you're new in the drug and alcohol arena, whether you are more seasoned with years or decades of experience, whether your role is full-time or part-time, doesn't matter. I want to honor your heart. I want to help enhance your passion. And ultimately, as you see in the subtitle, it was planning for impact with campus prevention. None of us are doing this because it's just something to do or because we feel good with it. It's we want to see something different. And my main message is we've done a lot over the years, but we can do an awful lot better. So this is all about honoring your heart, planning for impact with campus prevention. That's where we're going today. To be a little more formal, certainly there's some learning objectives. There's a 9-step model. This is the first time I'm presenting on the 9-step models. I shared with Orlando before we started, any prior discussion over the last 6 months of a 9-step model has been one slide. Here are the 9 steps. Today is much more detailed about that. I want to talk about a little bit some current strategies, some data. I'm going to highlight some of the national data that just came out that I've done, and then I'll talk about this history of that, the College Alcohol Survey, and then to become inspired and rejuvenated. I know there may be frustration now. There may be obstacles that you encounter on campus or in the community or at the state level or the national level, but this is meaningful work. This is important. So I hope to generate and help to light a spark for some new energy, some new engagement, and maybe some new ways of thinking about things and some tools that you can use to advocate more effectively for where you are going. Here's the topical outline, a real brief conceptual overview, a little bit on scope of the issue, areas of concern, hope, and opportunity. This is the data. This is College Alcohol Survey. And again, I'm not going to go too detailed. I did a long session last week only on the College Alcohol Survey data with the Higher Education Center. That is available online. The slides there, some of which are here, not all, some of which are here. The slides, the raw survey data is available on their website, and this is at Ohio State. And then the video itself from that webinar. And I know this will also be posted afterwards. I'll be sending a PDF of these slides. I'm going to spend a lot of time on the planning model. It doesn't look like it here, but that's where the majority of time is going to be, and then a summary, and we'll do some questions there. I know we're covering a lot. Part of my intent here is while we're covering a lot, when all is said and done, as you take this back to your team or to other campus leaders or others in the community, there may be a short segment you want to show. You may say, hey, let's just look at this piece on support services, or let's look at step 3 on the planning model. Let's look at those 90 seconds or that 2.5 minutes or whatever that is, and just pull that up. So that's ways you can use this webinar beyond this 1 hour. So here, first part is the contextual overview. I'm going to focus on the pyramid of success throughout this, because that's core to me. What it means is 3 things. 1 is competence, having good skills, current data, good knowledge, current knowledge, new language, whatever the latest is, and what is forward thinking. Confidence, you are the ones who know the most about drugs and alcohol for your campus. You are the leaders. That's my assumption. And so have confidence to speak up. Have confidence to speak out, have confidence to have your presence felt. And commitment is carrying this on even with the obstacles. I've been doing this since 1975. I started my graduate studies in 1971. I was in charge of a residence hall with 450 students for a couple of years. And yes, it was a football hall at Ohio State, and that's a whole different story. But commitment to carry this through. I did start in 1975. NIAAA and NIDA started early that decade, early 70s, is when National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism and National Institute on Drug Abuse were founded. That was early. And I wanted to do prevention. I wanted to go upstream, because most of the problems I faced in the residence hall and then the residence hall system where I was running in Virginia were drug and alcohol based. So commitment, staying with it. And then this perspective, I think, is important. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing's going to get better. It's just not. So that's where I go back to honoring your heart, planning for impact. We've done a lot and we can do better. I think all of us are focused on a healthy life. That's what we want for our students. That's what we want for our faculty staff. That's what we want for those who graduate from our institutions and move forward. And so the work we're doing is all about investing in lifetimes. This is an image of the student center. It's about 10 years old. They put this over the entry of the renovated or new student center, the Hurlburt Student Center at Radford University, investing in lifetimes. And I think that's what we are all about doing, helping students and then soon to be graduates having a meaningful, productive, and healthy life. A lot of this, and you'll see the same thing here with the competence, confidence, and commitment, that pyramid of success is the framework for the book that I did 2 years ago. It came out fall 2 years ago. And this this was based on interviews with 30 long-term professionals, not just in higher ed. There are higher ed professionals who I interviewed. What I wanted to do was interview people from all sorts of walks of life in alcohol and drugs, whether it was doing treatment work or prevention work or advocacy, whether it's at the state level, the national level, at the local level, on the campus, research, whatever their role was. Tell me about that. I had a dozen questions I asked of each of 30 people. I translated all that and organize that into this framework. Then I had other writers write short pieces, whether it was on DSM-5 or underage drinking or drinking and driving or substance use disorder issues, or whatever it was, recovery. So this is a book. It's about leadership, and that's what I hope you will do, to be translational, and some of their insights and some of their lessons, so that someone who doesn't know prevention can read a chapter on prevention, or someone who doesn't know recovery can read a chapter on intervention, treatment, and recovery, or believing in themselves, and so forth. So lots of issues here. There are quotes throughout this presentation that come right from this book. And then the other book just came out this last spring, and it's called Leading Campus Drug and Alcohol Abuse Prevention. So this focuses right on the campus. This one, Tom Hall and I wrote this. Tom was at University of Central Florida. He longtime leader in this field, from ACPA and NASPA work and his own work. And then now he runs the Orange County Drug-Free Coalition, Orange County, Florida, which is Orlando. And so we wrote the book, but we have 45 contributors, including Eastern's own Eric Davidson, and former role as GA in IHEC, Dave Clausen. We have case studies, we have lessons from the field, and we have an innovator category for each of the chapters. We have 14 student voices, and we have 31 worksheets in here. And so you'll see this is going to be the framework for the planning model. That's where we're going. So quickly, the scope of the issue. I'm going to breeze through this. More detail on the Higher Education Center website, and more detail with that presentation. So real quickly, this is from Monitoring the Future. This is Lloyd Johnston's work at University of Michigan and funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse. And this is just alcohol. We're just looking at alcohol. And that top line is 30-day use. You see that over the last 30-some years, 40-some years, this has actually gone down. It's been slow, but it's gone down. Then the heavier drinking didn't go down until about the last decade and a half. So one of the issues here is, this is great news that we have progress, but it's awfully slow. So the issue is, can we do better? And then this takes the same bottom line, that heavy drinking, which is what most of us are more concerned about, the heavier drinking, the binge, whatever you want to call that. And then the little dots there are the College Alcohol Survey. This is my take. There is no scale with 200 and some variables. This is my compilation that says in the 80s, in the 1980s, our efforts went up. This is nature of effort, quantity and quality of effort. Then it went down in the 90s, and then it was kind of lackadaisical, no change in the 2000s. And then in my view, it's been going down. And you'll see some of that evidence in the slides to come. Here are 3 slides that look at alcohol's involvement, just alcohol with various campus behaviors. Here are 5 of them listed here. Again, we see a slow downward trend. That's good news to see alcohol's involvement go down. Now, if it got to 0, wouldn't that be nice? Lots less problems. This is not a quantity of problems. This is a percentage of the incidence of these types of things that alcohol was involved with. Might be causal, might be correlational, but is certainly involved with. Here are some personal behaviors where alcohol is involved, some of the same patterns, and here's some academic pieces. Again, we can dive deeper. For this purpose, I want to focus more on that 9-step model. But we do see progress. That's the important message. The other important message is that it's awfully slow. I wish we could be faster. So now let's look at areas of concern, hope, and opportunity. This is all based on the College Alcohol Survey. It's something I co-authored for many years. It started when I was Director of Residence Life, and my colleague Angie Godoletto was head of counseling at Radford. We basically said, we wonder what colleges are doing to address alcohol. And that was 1979. We looked at policies, we looked at programs, we looked at support services. 3 years later, we said, we wonder how things have changed. And so we did that. And then 3 years later, and then that became the model for us. And so we've done this many, many times. It is unfunded, no other controls other than what my co-author and I want to know. And then we ask for input about what do you want to see when we gather data from our institutions. These are public, private, large and small, urban, rural, suburban, across every state in the nation. So that's where the results come from. We send it to the Chief Student Affairs Officer, and they respond or send it to the designated person on their campus. Alcohol involvement on campus hasn't changed much in 40 years. It's over 3/4. What has changed is the circumstances. You go back 40 years ago and only half required an alternative beverage, and then it's pretty much the norm. But you see 11% do not require an alternative beverage. Again, that's an area for opportunity. We can grow that. We can have 100% requiring alternative beverage. Food is another requirement. How about this? Here's the area of concern. If you look at the top line, server training required, that's going down. We're not requiring servers. Not as many schools are requiring servers as they were 3 years ago, as they were 3 years before that. There's an opportunity, and that's an area of concern. Do you prohibit low-priced drinks? So half do, that means half don't prohibit. Do you have an amnesty policy? That's a good thing. Look at the growth there on alcohol. The question was only about alcohol back in 2012 and then 2015, but then we added illicit drugs in 2018. And then we shifted the question based on participant feedback that says, tell us more about the amnesty policy. So you take that 89% and you say, for those who have an amnesty policy, what does it cover? And 99% cover dangerous drinking. 1% do not. And then you see the array here of other things about what the amnesty policy covers. The latest survey was spring of 2021. Of course, we're 1 year into COVID then, and so we added a COVID question here. You'll see another one shortly. How about strategies to deal with the current opioid epidemic? And so you see some strategies here. The bottom three are brand new for 2021. And just to start to track that, I mean, fentanyl detection strips, is that going to take off or not? We just wanted to track it. It's only 5% right now. What's it going to be in 2024 or 2027? Don't know. And then access to Narcan or SAP preparation for Narcan, almost half of our campuses. How about, what are your opinions? This is an opinion, not what are you doing? We have a few opinion questions. So effects of a policy shift on marijuana. And so you can see what's happening from 2021 and 2018. Not a whole lot of substantive change. Most of them are a little below where they were in 2018. But the important thing here is look at the scale here. 4 means no change. So when in 2021 we see that down, that's the rate of increase going down. We still are reporting increase of use of marijuana overall, or use of e-cigarettes as a result of the shift, the policy shift on marijuana. Use of other illicit drugs, basically no change. 4.09 says no change. That's right at 4. How about moving to education a little bit, prevention, education, and training, a focus period of time. Some things were very popular, and what happened back in the 1980s was that became the soup du jour. That became the thing that campuses did. We do an awareness week, we got it all covered. We're done for the year. You know, today the science says, no, that's not a comprehensive program. That was an event. That was a week. That was a day. That was a month. So it's going down in popularity, and that's fine. Other things have taken its place. Here's an array. We said at this point in time in 2021, there are 3 slides on this, and these are all in order on a scale of 1 to 4, 4 being we do this a lot. So the top one is alcohol-free events and activities, followed by bystander and some packaged internet-based educational programs. Social norms is 2.6, 2.56. Followed by other social media, down to Facebook. And again, one slide that follows this. I know I'm moving fast, so mine the data, look at it afterwards, look at the PowerPoint slides, see how this plays out for you. And moving on down. I mean, peer theater, we still keep on there because that was very popular 30 years ago. It's very influential, not so much today. So again, this is a point in time about what campuses are doing. It's also an opportunity for you as in your campus with your campus leaders to take stock of what you're doing, and maybe we should consider something more with Twitter or something less with Twitter or more with designated drivers and so forth. And again, there's more data. I mean, if we go back like with Safe Rides, we have more data on that, diving deeper, but that's not the main purpose. I wanted to give you some data here, some focused data to help infuse and help ground your own confidence. and competence. How about overall approaches? I'm concerned about that top one, the orientation program slipping down. Will that be the case? Is that a beginning of a trend? Don't know. And orientation program for parents dropping markedly. How about faculty? And when I think of faculty, I look at missed opportunities. On a 4-point scale, it maxes out just below 3 for the top one, intervention for mental health issues and alcohol drug issues. So, and again, not a whole lot of change over time. And if you look at 2021, that's generally below where we were in prior years, generally. But again, tremendous opportunity. Shifting now to support services, where can a student with a drinking problem get counseling assistance? This is a great area of hope, and maybe some of these could be grown a little bit. How about group counseling for problem drinkers, whether it's counseling, group counseling experience, or an AA type group? Or how about an Al-Anon type group? Going down, and it's a free service. And we also have this for marijuana and other drugs. Again, I'm not showing that slide, but the support services for the loved ones. How about, does your campus have organized recovery services? And again, that grew over 6 years ago, no change from 3 years ago. And then if you do have recovery services, if you're in that 46%, what does that look like? So you see the main growth here, even through 2021 and the pandemic, is having a designated coordinator or leader. Okay, and then recovery housing at 19% at the bottom of this is a brand new question, so we don't have prior data. Again, faculty involvement, and most of the others have gone down, but or say the same from 3 years ago, and gone down from 6. But again, some tremendous opportunity here and some areas of concern, but lots of hope. Does your campus center collect and report data? You know, we're at 40%, whether it's alcohol or marijuana. We're at 39 or 40% for those two. Great opportunities for 60% to be gathering those in the future. How about this? Have you done a formal assessment of the effectiveness of your program in the last 3 years? That's 42%, down from 3 years and 6 years ago. And we all know that this is required. This is part of the biennial review, which is why we first asked the question in '94, because the federal government, through the biennial review process, and Eric's written about this in our latest book, in the book on leading campus drug and alcohol abuse prevention, about what is a biennial review. And I know IHAC has done work on the biennial review. Why is this not 100%? At least to take a look at it. Doesn't mean you have to show that it's effective. You're looking at the effectiveness. Have you even done a survey? Look at this is going down over the last decade. And it's not just a survey of use, but it could be perceptions or even knowledge or attitudes. So, do you have a coordinator? This is going down. I'm concerned about this. Do you have a coordinator? It doesn't mean a full-time person necessarily. Could be. That's further data. What is that? Oops, this doesn't show for some reason now that I'm in the slideshow mode. It did in the prior, but what this is supposed to show is what does the campus coordinator do with their time, and what it's supposed to show is it's arrayed over different areas of responsibility, from counseling to programming to task force work to research, meaning that the campus coordinator has lots of hats that they wear. And then in terms of and I'll have that fixed for the PowerPoint when it gets shared in the PDF. How do they spend their time in terms of the various substances? Look at drugs is only 10%. That includes marijuana. So wellness is a big chunk, now has eked out alcohol. And if we looked at that over time, you can see that alcohol as an area of emphasis has gone down in terms of what the coordinator does, what they do on the campus. How about peer groups? Almost 2/3 doing it. What a tremendous opportunity for engaging peers to a higher level. And how about collaboration from local businesses all the way up to campus police? But these have pretty systematically gone down, pretty consistently gone down over time. Do you have a strategic plan? That's what we're going to focus on momentarily. Do you have a plan? Less than half have a formalized plan. That's pretty consistent over time. And how about coordination at the state level? State efforts, that's the blue line. You know, you're at 60, they're at 60%. IHEC, Illinois has a great state coordination effort, but community partnerships going down, campus coordination, campus task force, campus organized efforts down. Now, a couple last slides. We have 2 slides here on changes believed to be related to the pandemic. Student outreach with mental health issues, faculty staff outreach with mental health issues, marijuana, and so forth. And this is on a scale of 1 to 7. And what you're seeing is that the highest, again, is with student outreach for mental health. And then we have assistance with persistence with various other issues and parties, patronage. Of course, what we don't know about parties and bars, the last couple, what we don't know is, was the campus open or closed? And so Bill DeYoung, former director of the Higher Ed Center, said, why don't we do a follow-on, which we are doing right now. The data set is still being populated with the campuses that responded. We said, what was your status in terms of your residence halls, fall and spring of 2021, and what was your classroom status? Were your classes in session or virtual? So we'll do some analysis based on that, and the parties might be different with those that were open. And then here's one with social media. What's the perceived impact of social media on student behavior? And what I want to highlight here, again, on the same 7-point scale, 4 being the midpoint of no change, the bottom 3, practice of safe and responsible practices. So an engagement in lower risk use of alcohol. So what that means is these are opportunities. They said social media had no impact. So what can we do with social media to have an impact on responsible use and lower risk use? So that's where that goes. So I'm going to end with the data and move the rest of the time to the planning model. And this is what Tom and I came up with from being involved with numerous planning models. And I'm going to share the 9-step model with you in detail. So this is the first presentation that has gone beyond this slide, where we look at each of these 9 areas. I'm going to share this with you. What you'll see for each of these is an emphasis. For example, the first one is foundations and impetus. And then I have what I've prepared for each of these is like a brief synopsis of what does that mean. And then sometimes there's resources, sometimes there's additional explanations, sometimes I'll illustrate worksheets, and then I'll always have a quote that comes from the leadership book from 2 years ago. So the first step is, where do you start? And it's our view, we don't start with a task force. We don't start with a needs assessment. We start with something fuzzy, and that's okay. Meaning maybe we need to be doing something. So perhaps you're on a campus where nothing is really being done, and you go to a webinar and say, maybe we should do something and let's try to figure out what it is. Maybe there's a crisis. Maybe there's a sense by somebody, faculty member, staff member, student leader, president, chancellor, things are out of control. Alumni, maybe you just want to take a fresh look. We've been doing things for 20 years. We've been doing things for 3 years. We hired a coordinator. We just want to take a different look. Whatever that is, it's okay. It's okay. And this helps to clarify the why. And what I share with you with this is, remember this. Why did you start? Why did you start? I mean, I started this work with Angie Godoletto. I was in charge of the residence halls at Radford starting in 1977, 78 for 4 years. And we said we want to promote more of a caring community. And so we started a student organization called ACT, Alcohol Consciousness Team, ACT, because you care. That's where we started in 1978. It was fuzzy, and then that grew and one thing led to another. So it's okay, start with your assumptions, whatever it is, start there. And then as you're doing this, Robert Lynn, who's done a lot of work with treatment and recovery issues, a lot of work internationally and nationally, have courage to believe in yourself. This goes back to listening to your heart, honor your heart, believe in yourself, take a deep breath, trust, look for mentors on your campus. They may not be involved with drugs or alcohol. They may be in the community. They may be alumni. It may be throughout the state or nation. Look for mentors and try to learn as much as you can. That helps to ground you. Then convene organizing groups. That's where we get involved with others. And so think about various constituencies. They may be stakeholders. They may be gatekeepers. Think about people who have a vested interest or for whom there might be a vested interest. I mean, think about, I'll go back to faculty. Go back to faculty. For whom could this be of benefit? Whether it's a research interest or student projects or field activities. And I'm going to say, thinking about, I'll come back to this slide in a moment, but look at this. The way we've conceptualized this, Tom and I in our book, a steering committee, that's a very nimble group. That's going to meet more often. That might be 4 or 5 people. Then a leadership group. That might be 15, might be 20, might be blue ribbon committee, different constitutions for different campuses. Then you may have a larger advisory body. That might meet semi-annually. That might be 50 people. That might be all sorts of stakeholders around the campus. So if we go back to the convening organizing groups, think about their roles, their responsibilities, maintain the aim of institutionalization is very important. And think about substantive involvement. When I was asked to be involved at George Mason University's task force, the first time I was the token faculty member. The second time they had a task force, I said, I will be happy to participate, but there needs to be more than one faculty member. There needs to be several. And you have to have meaningful engagement from several students, not just a token. This is not just a 10-person staff task force. I will not participate unless it's really substantive, unless you really promise to use the report. When you do the report, don't let it be a shelf report. Let it be a meaningful report that can go to action, be put into action. And then identify where the organizing office should be. One of the things that concerns me is burying the alcohol and other drug effort within wellness. While conceptually, I believe that alcohol and drug issues are wellness oriented, often that's a reason used by campus leadership to bury it. I know of campuses today that say we do not want to promote recovery services because we don't want to be known as a campus that has recovering people. What? And I go, what? But that happens today. So what is the rationale for where you are organized, where you are housed, to whom do you report? My proposal is a high level. And then maybe there's dual reporting. So you might have functional reporting, but you might also report to the chancellor or the president on a quarterly or semi-annual basis to do a briefing. The point is, if the campus really wants to deal with this issue of drug and alcohol misuse prevention, it needs to take it seriously. Take it seriously, it's got to provide substantive resources and substantive visibility to that leadership. Because this issue, as we see in the data early in this presentation, this issue of alcohol alone, and then we can compound it with marijuana and opiates, and then who knows what's next. This issue comprises a large proportion of our campus problems. And if we were to successfully deal with this issue, then those problems go down. So it's in the vested interest of campus leadership to support this. Dari Davis, who was an active prevention leader in the state of Maryland, and then went to the national level with Departments of Education and Health and Human Services, and then ONDCP, National Drug Control Policy, said we, prevention people, felt like we were on a mission, and we supported each other at the state level and local and helped each other. And I think that that's important when you think about your organizing groups, when you think about your advisory group, think about that, particularly your steering committee, that helps to organize and support one another, you care one another, and you help to problem solve about how you overcome a lot of the obstacles and the challenges that are indeed out there. Third step, develop some core foundations. The overall vision. What is your overall vision? What is the vision about campus culture? What is the vision about drugs and alcohol? What do you want to prevent and what do you want to promote? Those are often different. Prevent is prevent the negative, prevent the harm, prevent the misuse, the abuse, the deaths, the injuries. What do you want to promote? Healthy living, decision-making, conflict resolution, relationship skills, coping, time management. Sounds like a lot of wellness, stress management, communication, assertiveness. So what do you want to promote? So think about how those dovetail. And then guiding principles, that is so important. What are your guiding principles? I shared one about the task force that I was involved in. I said, make it meaningful. Another one, get student involvement and make that meaningful. What are your guiding principles? Maybe a principle is this should be led by student government or student organization. Peer involvement is essential. We need good data. We need to have good monitoring a long time. We need to institutionalize. What are your guiding principles? And again, all of this comes from the book that Tom and I did. Lots more detail. This is some of the highlights. And then desired outcomes and processes. What are your measures? How are you going to make decisions? How you want to be seen? How do you want to be heard? What is it that you intend for your work? So here's a couple of worksheets. I mean, one on the left is campus vision development, and this does say, and which is hard to read on the left. What it does say is, what do you want to prevent and what do you want to promote, both in terms of outcomes and processes. And then we implement good theory, like stages of change, with pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. And so that's the worksheet. And again, these are among the 31 in our book. There's other resources that are out there. The Strategic Prevention Framework from SAMHSA, that's been around maybe 20 years. And then take note of this one on the right, best fit. I'll come back to that in a moment. Best fit programs and practices. Very interesting. So that's recent publication out there. Here's one, I think substance misuse prevention is like a year old, and then prevention core competencies. These are not higher ed based. Substance use prevention addresses higher ed. Prevention core competencies is a cost prevention. And that came out this past spring. So these are new resources that can be very helpful to your work. Jeff Linkenbach, very active with social norms marketing. He talks about frameworks. This will tie into our logic model in a couple steps, but it also works here with some of our foundations here with developing core foundations. Is the framework of science to action was incomplete. It's not saying it's wrong, but it's incomplete, but it's pervasive. So we don't have to always think about clinical experiment and pre-test, post-test control group design. I think that's his message here. Next step, document your baseline needs. Now let's get some data. We started in step one with some fuzziness. That's fine. Now let's get some real documentation, some qualitative needs assessment. Make sure you're quantitative and qualitative. We want quality needs assessment, but some data and some stories and some interpretations. Get your stakeholders and gatekeepers involved. What do they want to know? What would be helpful to them? What would be helpful to them? What would help give them confidence? What would help give them some desire to be more involved and more supportive of these initiatives? How do we know we have a need? Where do we see the need? I mean, is it higher in our first year students? Is it higher with off campus? How about people who are first generation or Gen Z or persons of color and so forth? So where is the need? Where's the need? And then I'll come back to the Institute of Medicine framework with a protractor, but this can be helpful as we document our needs. And then we use those needs as we plan. Mary Wilford, recently retired from the NCAA, worked a lot with the Choices grants and drug testing, but her emphasis here was we have to walk hand in hand with the peer movement. Policy is important, but we've got to get our peers involved and help to design and plan and implement and review the efforts that we are undertaking. Next, use some constructs to determine the area of focus. This is where the protractor comes in. That'll be the next slide, but building on the needs assessment and other contextual factors like the institutional history, priorities, culture aims. What do you want? What do you want to prevent? What do you want to promote? Use some theoretical constructs. Here's a couple we cited. Logic models are very, very important. Again, more on that in a moment. Identify audiences. So higher risk might be fraternity sorority, or it might be those that have houses on campus versus off campus, or it might be student athletes, or it might be student leaders, which what I've found on some campuses. And also attend to the root causes. Again, more on that very shortly. The Institute of Medicine model the protractor. And again, Tom and I use these three issues, universal, selective, and indicators, as three distinct chapters among our 14 chapters in our book. And we want to highlight selective because we think that that's often been underutilized. I mean, selective is traditionally, we think of first-year students, student athletes, and fraternity sorority members, but it's much more than that. Others with unique needs, others maybe the military connected students, or those with campus disciplinary charges, or those convicted of an impaired driving offense, or LGBTQIA students, or again, first gen, or person with who's got a loved one who's got a substance use disorder. So again, selective can be much broader than that, and we can be much more proactive with our selective, and we can gather some good data there, because often we have, if you will, membership groups. Often we do not have membership groups. Again, using the strategic prevention framework that I highlighted earlier, or the DEA 2 years ago came out with a very helpful publication that has planning tools in it based on the strategic prevention framework. Here's some resources I did. Yes, most recent is these are 20 years old. But what this does with these three different resources, again, still online, I look at the 2001 book and think it's like my grandmother's cookbook. There's still a lot of good recipes. It doesn't have microwave cooking. It doesn't have a lot of the more current things, but there's still some good recipes. Lots of good ideas in here. Tear out the last 20 pages on technology, because those are obviously dated, and add another 40 or 50 pages. And then it's valid. But the action planner is a step-by-step model, and then the task force planner. The action planner has 8 steps. You see guiding principles is the second from the bottom. And then you also see the task force planner, which is like a big poster. It's a shared responsibility grid, and it shows how big the job is. You can look at this online in a PDF format, but it shows across the top these 8 categories of a comprehensive program, and it shows 10 groups that can be involved, and this shows where these intersect in the cells where they intersect is how can student life be involved in each of the 8, or how can faculty be involved in each of the 8, or the police and security in each of the 8 different areas of a comprehensive program. When I think about root causes that I highlighted as part of this, I think about this model. We have a lot at the top of the model from organization and resources, but root causes often we don't address. We deal with symptoms. And out of a think tank, and I offer this again, this is 20 years old, 25 years old, in fact, where a think tank was convened at the University of Notre Dame, and 200 people had vision groups, and we orchestrated how do we better deal with the root causes. This is what came out of this. And then we translated this at Mason in an innovative way. We got a national award for it, a model program from Department of Education about showing evidence of success, which we did with our first-year students by emphasizing these 7 themes, but we did it in a different way. We did it with 31 different topics that are buried within those themes. More on this website that you can go to and explore, and you can always reach out to me afterwards with a email or a phone afterwards. Carol Comfer, who used to be director of the Center for Substance Abuse Prevention, said, we're making progress on getting rid of some of the myths about alcohol and drug use. And we talk about the genetic basis and environmental basis. And I interviewed her, 4 years ago. And we know a lot of this, but a lot of others around us do not know the genetics or the environmental thrust. So there's a lot of hope. Preparing our plans. Now let's get into the actual plans. And what we want to do is avoid a ready, fire, aim approach. We really want to be thoughtful and planful with this. We think that this sort of process, this 9-step model, will be helpful. We talk about a best fit. I mentioned that before with a SAMHSA publication. That ties into our logic model. And what it ties into also is we look at, you hear the discussions about evidence-based, and Tom and I talk about evidence-informed, because one of the concerns with evidence-based is it may not be a good for your campus. It may be valid elsewhere, but may not be valid for your campus, which is larger or smaller or more urban or more rural, or just a different culture of students or different priorities for the campus. The other piece is it may not be implemented with the same integrity, with the same fidelity that was done that got the data that showed that it was evidence-based. It doesn't mean discard it. It means take that into caution and look at what's the best fit. The evidence-informed also allows for innovation, like I shared the COMPASS program that came out of the think tank at University of Notre Dame. So what is your theory? What is, when you think about stages of change, or you think about health belief model, think about other models of behavioral change, what is your theory undergirding that? And look at your local needs and your local outcomes. So this came from blending maybe 20 different logic models. We've all seen these in different places, and we put this together for this purpose, for the purpose of this book and higher education, in terms of inputs, outputs, and outcomes. Again, also focusing what you want the audience to know, feel, or do as a result of whatever your large-scale overall campus initiative is, or your individualized, whether it's a training or a faculty outreach, whether it's a campaign or a program, whatever it is, what do you want the audience to know, feel, or do? And then gather measures that will help document that, and whether you got there and how you did it. A sample worksheet, I mentioned a menu of strategies in that summary. So this will be helpful, again, from our book. And then planning goals and objectives, and planning for collaboration with many of the organizing groups highlighted in step 2. Mary Hill, very active with Texas and again across the nation. Talk about being creative when we have some problems and some challenges and some obstacles. And I think that's the point, raising the bottom here, raising the bottom with our root causes and being innovative and trying to address that. The last 3 steps, very quickly, substantive evaluation. Substantive evaluation. Did we accomplish what we set out in terms of what we want people to know, feel, or do? Looking at outcomes and processes, not just feel good, but did we have a substantive result? Look at quantitative data and qualitative data. Qualitative data. And then when you think about your campaigns like communications, what were your messages that you sent out, and what did you intend, and what was heard, and what impact did they have? What's the so what out of the messages? Involve faculty. Think about communications faculty there. And again, some worksheets here. This is a prevention outreach checklist and after action report that can help. On the right is an organizational self-assessment, and then here's a couple of communication worksheets from 2 different chapters. Our quote for this, Bill Modzelewski was in charge of the Office of Safe and Drug-Free Schools in the U.S. Department of Education for many years, and his basic point is with our efforts and with our communications, we need to think more in terms of marketing, and then get the engagement of our young people, get in the engagement of our students that we're trying to reach. And we're not doing that, or his point was we're not doing that. So this is communicate in their language. And so it may not be me who's communicating, it may not be you who's communicating, but you're finding out who the best communicator is and how those dovetail with whether it's the coach or the trainer or the student leader, the team leader, when you're dealing with athletics, or fraternity leader, sorority leader, whomever. So thinking about that. BJ McConnell, who worked very actively with higher ed and also with DARE. I find this quote very interesting. The advice I'd give to a 21-year-old, people are terrific. Life is curiously interesting. And if you need chemicals to make it okay, then what was the question you're asking if that's the answer? Something to ponder and maybe something to reflect back on and share with others, whether it's through the evaluation initiatives or with your programming. Couple last slides, review and revise. Periodically, we do need to review, take our evaluation findings, reflect on it. And I talk about regular reviews, whether that's a training, we have a pre-post test, that's great. Maybe some follow-on, campaigns, what message did you hear? The biennial review or an annual review, many of us have to do annual reports, and then a substantive review every 5 years, 6 years. And then look at the results and revise. The important thing is to revise. And then here's a worksheet about our synthesis and review. Tom Griffin, very active nationally, and then also with Minnesota Institute for Public Health. Be willing to change your mind. Look at other evidence that guides decision making. the best fit ties into what works in one community and one culture may not work in others. So be flexible. Look at Evans. And then promote institutionalization. This is the bottom line. This is step 9. Institutionalization. We don't want just a program for a year or two. We don't want just a grant that's going to get us through a couple of years. A grant would be very helpful to grow something, but ultimately we want to sustain it. We want to institutionalize it. We want to revise it. Focus on the campus culture. Think about the long-term perspective, the bottom bullet here, long-term strategies. As you're speaking with our stakeholders, here's some other resources. Here's some other resources that will help you, whether it's with data or using support materials. Think about how we're communicating, getting their support as we institutionalize. The next to the last quote has to do with this. Stephen Schmidt, very active with Pennsylvania for years, and now at the national level, NABCA, now called National Alcohol Beverage Control Association, focus on policies makers to understand good prevention is about policy. So it's not just about the rules, but about our thrust. It's about our culture focus. It's not just a simple message. So in summary, where were we? It's all about a healthy life. It's about a meaningful, productive, healthy life. And it's about investing in lifetimes. I set out with these 3 objectives: the long-term perspective with a 9-step model, planning for comprehensive, using strategies and resources, and hopefully to inspire and rejuvenate. Bill Kane, active with a lawyer's assistance program. He's very active in New Jersey, and he set up something that many of us don't want to know about, something maybe 10 years ago, something called the Judges Assistance Program. We've heard of EAPs, the Lawyer's Assistance Program, the Judges Assistance Program for our judges. But he said, from his wisdom, it's important for people working in this field to never give up, never give up. And that's the case for our individuals in our programs. We have an uphill battle. We've made a lot of progress. We can do a lot more. We can do a lot better. It's important that we all reflect on ourselves, upon where we are, where we're going, maintain hope, nourish ourselves. And again, thinking about our competence, confidence, and commitment. I'll end with that, knowing that the intent here was to honor your heart and think about impact. My hope is that these tools have been helpful for you and will be helpful for you, that you're going to be doing. I thank you for being here. I thank you for all you have done. I thank you for all you're going to do. Again, my thanks to Eric, to Madison, and to Orlando. At this point, we'll turn to questions. I know Orlando is looking at the chat, which I have not been able to do. So he will take any questions. And again, I am welcome to receive questions by email, by phone. Happy to talk, happy to set up a Zoom, happy to talk on the phone, happy to do email correspondence, address anything that may not have been clear or where you'd like some more resources. So at this point, I'll go to any questions that Orlando may see from you who've been here. So again, thank you for being here. Orlando, back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. And as you said, we're open to questions right now, so we'll go that a few minutes.
Okay. And there may not be questions right now as people are thinking. You see that I put the URLs for many of the resources. You know, SAMHSA, DEA. I put the URLs for our books there. For those going to NASPA Strategies Conference in January in Boston, I'll be doing more sessions. Tom and I will be doing a session on the whole session on the book. I'll be doing more on the College Alcohol Survey. I have several sessions approved for that. Happy to sit down face to face and just talk one-on-one or two-on-one, whatever is working for you. But my aim is to be helpful. My aim is to, again, as the workshop title says, looking for impact. Questions from anybody? These would be in the chat part or in the questions part, Orlando?
the question box, but there seems to be no questions. So I'll
Okay.
just go out and close this.
Okay.
Please keep an
Oh,
eye out for an email for GoToWebinar that will come about a day after the program. The email will have a link for you to fill out an evaluation. This evaluation will really help us with planning future events. Certificates will be issued within 7 to 10 business days from the webinar, and we will have the webinar available to view on the iHike website. Thank you for everyone for attending this event today, and thank you, Dr. Anderson, for presenting.
thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for being here. Best wishes to all.